Hello and welcome back to the lesson. In this video, we're going to be talking about the while loop in Python. So what is the while loop? With the while loop, we can go ahead and execute a set of statements as long as a condition is true. For example, let's define an indexing variable. Let's come over here and say I is equals to 1. And then we're going to come down here and define our while loop. Let's say while I is less than 6, colon. Then we're going to go ahead and define what to do when I is less than 6. So let's go ahead and say we wanted to print I itself. Alright. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and increment I by 1. So let's go ahead and say I, use our assignment operators, plus equals to 1. Alright, so let me actually go ahead and explain exactly what this block of code will do when we run our script. So basically, the while loop right here requires relevant variables to be ready, which is our I here that we've created, and we set it to 1. And right here we said while I is less than 6, go ahead and print I itself. And then after printing I, then go ahead and increment I by 1. So basically what will happen now is it is going to go ahead and check the first condition right here. So the initial value of I is 1. So now the condition will read as 1 is less than 6. So if this our condition is true, then this our print statement will be executed. So 1 is less than 6, which is true, so I will be printed. So the initial value of I is 1. So now 1 will be printed like so. Let me actually go ahead and demonstrate to you. So in the first iteration, it is going to print 1, okay? And then after printing 1, it will then go ahead and increment I by 1. So this line of code will be I plus equals to 1, meaning I is equals to I plus 1. If you remember correctly, the assignment operator plus equals to is the same thing as saying I now is equals to I plus 1, something like this. And the initial value of I is 1. So now I will be 2 because I is equals to 1 plus 1, which is going to be 2. So now I is 2. So the value of I right here now will be changed to 2 after the first iteration. And then it will go ahead and check for the second iteration. Now the value of I is 2. So it's going to check whether 2 is less than 6, which is true this time around, and it's going to print I again. And this time around, in the second iteration, I is 2. So it's going to print 2. And then it will go ahead and increment I by 1, which is 2 plus 1, 3. So after the increment, it will go ahead and go for the third iteration. And now I is 3. And then it's going to go ahead and say, while 3 is less than 6, which is true, 3 is of course less than 6. Go ahead and print this line of statement, which is I. So now 3 will be printed like so. And then 3 will be incremented by 1. 3 plus 1 is 4. And then it will go for the fourth iteration. Then it's going to go ahead and check, is 4 less than 6? Yes, of course, 4 is less than 6. So it's going to go ahead and print 4. And then go ahead and increment 4 by 1 right here, which is going to be 5. Now, I need to go ahead and check for the while condition right here. Now the value of I is 5. So it's going to go ahead and check whether 5 is less than 6. Which is true, then it is going to go ahead and print I, which is the 5, like so. And then after printing 5, it is going to go ahead and increment 5 by 1. And then now the value of I will be 6. And then it will go ahead and now go ahead and check for the condition. Is 6 less than 6? No, 6 is of course not less than 6. So the condition will fail now. And if the condition evaluates to false, then the print statement here will not be executed. The print statement within our while loop will only be executed when our condition right here, when our while loop condition evaluates to true. So it is going to end right there. So now when we run this program, this is exactly what we are expecting to have. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is basically how the while loop works. Now let's actually go ahead and run our script. Let me go ahead and get rid of this example code. Let me get rid of this. I believe you understand everything. So now let's go ahead and run our script. As you can see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it will not be printing 6 because 6 is not less than 6. So the condition does not satisfy. That's why the print statement within our while loop will not be executed. the 6 will not be printed out. So this is basically the concept of the while loop. It go ahead and execute a set of statements as long as a condition is true. Alright, and we can of course go ahead and print anything that we want, or print any line of statement that we want apart from the I. We can simply go ahead and say hello, something like this. And now if we go ahead and run our script, we're gonna get hello 5 times. As you can see, we have hello, 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 hello. So this is basically a way for us to execute a block of code or a specific statement a certain number of time in our program. Alright, now let me actually go ahead and change this back to I, like so. Okay, let's go ahead and run our script. Okay, we have our 1 to 5. Now we're going to go ahead and discuss about how to use break statement within our while loop. Let me comment it out right here, using break statement. Okay, sorry, here should be break, not break. Okay, something like this. So basically the idea behind the break statement is we can go ahead and stop the loop even while the condition is true. So let me actually go ahead and show you how to do that, how we can go ahead and stop our while loop even when the condition evaluates to true. For example, let's say we wanted to exit the loop when I is 3. So let's go ahead and see how we can achieve that. Alright, let's come over here. After our print statement, we're going to go ahead and use the if statement. We're going to say if I is equals to 3, colon, enter within our if scope. Then we're going to go ahead and pass our break statement. Alright, something like this. And then after that, then we increment our I by 1. Alright, so basically what we are saying is the moment I reaches 3, then we should go ahead and break the loop. Meaning we should go outside the loop. We should exit the loop. Okay, we should stop from there. So let's go ahead and now run our script to see for ourselves. As you can see, now we have only 1, 2, 3. So here basically the if statement serves as our criteria for checking when I reaches 3, when I is 3, then we go ahead and use our break statements to exit the loop. And the iteration ends immediately whenever we use the break statement. So we can simply go ahead and play around with that. Let's actually go ahead and set when it's 2. So when I is 2, go ahead and break, exit the loop. Don't continue. So let's go ahead and run our script. As you can see, we have only 1 and 2. And if you go ahead and say should be 4, we would have 1 to 4. As you can see, so this is basically the break statement, how we exit the loop even when our while condition right here is still true. So this is basically how we use the break statement within our while loop. Alright, now let's go ahead and talk about using the continue statement. So let's go ahead and say using continue statements. Okay, something like this. Alright, so with the continue statement, we can stop the current iteration and continue with the next. So how do we achieve that? Let's actually go ahead and set if I is 3, alright, instead of break. Let me go ahead and comment this line of code. We're going to use the continue statement right now. Continue, something like this. So it is going to now skip 3. When I is 3, I will be skipped. It will not print the 3, but it will skip and move to the next iteration, which is 4. As I've just mentioned that with the continue statement, we can go ahead and stop the current iteration and continue with the next. Alright, let me actually go ahead and get rid of this. Okay, because we are done with the break statement. And with the continue statement, we need to take this, our increment should be starting from here, like so. Immediately after the condition, we pass the condition, we should go ahead and have our increment, and then our print statement right here should be after our continue statement right here, something like this. So let's go ahead and now run our script and see for ourselves. So as you can see, we have 2, 4, 5, and 6. We do not have 3 because we skipped it using the continue statement right here. Alright, so let me actually go ahead and clarify things a bit. As you can see right here, we define our indexing, initial indexing, I is equals to 1. And here we're checking while I is less than 6, 1 is less than 6, which evaluates to true, which is true. then go ahead and increment I by 1. So it's going to be 1 plus 1. Now I is 2. So now it's going to check if 2, which is our I value here, is equals to 3. So go ahead and execute the continuous statement. So this condition evaluates to false, and remember, the condition within our if block will only be executed if it evaluates to true. But this one evaluates to false because now I is 2 and 2 is not equals to 3. So this continuous statement will not be executed, but the print statement here for the while loop will be executed. That's why we are having 2 right here. 2 is printed. Then after that, we're going to go for the next iteration, for the second iteration. And now the value of I is 2. And then we're going to go ahead and check while 2 is less than 6, which is true. Go ahead and increment 2 by 1. Now 2 will be 3. 2 plus 1, 3. And then we're going to go ahead and check if I, which is 3, if 3 is equals to 3, which is true, then we're going to go ahead and execute our continuous statement, which will skip and exit out of the loop without executing this print statement. That means 3 will not be executed because of this continuous statement. So now we're going to go ahead and move for the next iteration. And now I is 3. So it's going to check, is 3 less than 6? Yes, 3 is of course less than 6. Then we're going to go ahead and say, okay, 3 plus 1, which is 4. So we're going to go ahead and now check if 4 is equals to 3, which is false. Then this continuous statement will not be executed, but this print statement will be executed. So now our I is 4, so 4 will be printed. And then after that, we're going to go for the next iteration. Now I is 4, so we're going to go ahead and say while 4 is less than 6, which is true, 4 is of course less than 6, go ahead and increment 4 by 1. 4 plus 1 is 5. And then we're going to go ahead and check if 5 is equals to 3, which is false. Then this continuous statement will not be executed, but the print statement here will be executed. And here we are simply saying we should print I, which is 5, because the value of I in this iteration is 5. So that's why we are having 5 right here. And then after printing our 5, then we go for the next iteration again. And now the value of I is 5. And then here we are simply checking if 5 is less than 6, which is true. And then we're going to go ahead and increment 5 by 1. 5 plus 1, 6. And then after the increment, then we go ahead and check if 6 is equals to 3, which is not. Then this continuous statement will not be executed, but the print statement within our while loop will be executed. And in this iteration, I is being incremented from 5 to 6. So 6 will be printed. So that's why we are having 6 right here. You get the idea. Alright, so friend, that's how we go about using the continuous statements within our while loop. Now we're going to go ahead and discuss about using the else statement within our while loop. So let's go ahead and now comment it out. Let's go ahead and say using the else statement, like so. Alright, so with the else statement, we can go ahead and run a block of code once when the condition is no longer true. For example, we can simply go ahead and say we wanted to print a message once our condition is false. So let me actually go ahead and change this back to ordinary while loop without the continue or break statement. So let's go ahead and get rid of this. Alright, something like this. I'm going to go ahead and say I is equals to 1 while I is less than 6. Print I. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and specify our increment. I is plus equals to 1. Increment I by 1. We need to pass this to give our while loop a limit for it not to continue looping forever. So we need to specify a limit so that this condition will finally be false at some point, because I is incremented, the value of I is incremented, so that it will reach a point where I is no longer less than 6. So this is the reason why we must specify this increment right here. So now that we have this, if we go ahead and run our script, as you can see, we only have 1 to 5. So using the else statement, we can run a block of code once when the condition is no longer true. So now that the condition is no longer true, it stopped at 5. So what if we wanted to specify a message? So let's go ahead and now specify a message and mind the indentation. There should be no indentation while using the else, because the else will belongs to the while loop right here. Alright, so let's come over here and say else print I is no longer less than 6. Alright, now let's go ahead and run our script. As you can see, we have our output 1, 2, 5, and here it says I is no longer less than 6. So this is basically the idea of using the else statement for our while loop to basically execute a block of code once when our condition is no longer true. So friend, that will be it for this video. I hope everything is clear to you and that you enjoy the lessons, and I will see you in the next one.